Created in 2005 and hosted by security industry veterans, Paul Security Weekly is your source for in-depth coverage of the latest vulnerabilities, exploits, and security research. Our weekly security news discussion dives deep into the security issues we face today and potential solutions in a fun and lively atmosphere. Each week, we bring on guests from the security community to learn about their journey and discuss topics relevant to their work and research. You can also subscribe to our show by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Paul Security Weekly in your favorite podcast catcher. We've recorded a ton of content over the years, so we created Spotify playlists featuring some of our favorite episodes, including interviews with Marcus Random, John McAfee, and Chris Roberts, to name a few. You can find them at securityweekly.com/starter packs.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Follow us on LinkedIn for updates across our organization, show highlights, and more. You can find us by searching for Security Weekly Productions. And now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news, you can check out securityweekly.com/ESW339 if you want to follow along and check out the stories we're going to be talking about today. And that is the acronym for the show and the number. We are on number 339. I'm not sure how many I've done, but it's a lot. We also have Mr. Tyler Shields joining us. Hello, Tyler.
Hey, what's going on, my friend? Good to see you again. And episode 339, that is a lot of shows.
And Katie is still with us. We had some good conversations today, good interviews. Lots of interesting stuff, fun stuff. All right, so I want to start with the acquisitions because there's some pretty big ones. Yeah? You agree, Tyler?
Sure. That sounds wonderful. There are a couple of big ones this past week and a half or so.
So I've got my opinion on enterprise browsers, and just because one had a decent exit doesn't change my opinion on it. But Talon did have a decent exit. I guess, I don't know, 3x of money raised, something like that. But Talon Cyber got acquired. Rumor is, it's not an official number, $625 million to Palo Alto Networks.
Yeah, pretty serious acquisition for a market that we didn't think was viable, worthy of anything. But apparently there must be a there, as they say.
So we got to separate out two things. Just because somebody's buying a product. So again, go back to FireEye. FireEye went public. They bought Mandiant for nearly $1 billion. Product didn't have a whole lot of value, didn't matter, right? Like, you can build a successful cybersecurity company and have a product that's a complete flop. It's just the nature of cybersecurity. Like, you don't know why you didn't have that breach. Was it the $1 million you spent on FireEye or the $1 million you spent on training personnel? Yeah,
it's always tough to know what
good processes.
Within reason, it's tough to know what the correct mitigating factor that stops something could be. And that's what they always say about the defense in depth, right? That's why you have it, because one thing may stop it while something else may not. But the problem with defense in depth, as we all know, is depending on how much you lean into the statement can very quickly turn into expense in depth, right? And you end up just blowing a lot of money for no required reason. And like anything else in cyber, it's a balance. It's about finding the correct balance given the risk portfolio of your environment.
So in my case, when we acquired FireEye, after I recommended we don't, I kept track of exactly what the value was in US dollars. So it was the cost of the system, the cost of the labor, and every time it discovered a false positive and we had to work with support, that was additional negative value it was producing. And overall, over the first year of ownership, it produced about $500,000 of negative value.
Oof.
Never once produced any positive value.
That's the interesting thing, right? I wonder how many other industries you can have that you can buy something and directly produce a negative value for your business or for your household or your individual, right? So like when you buy a car, in general, I don't know of buying a new car anyway. Certainly a dud lemon or something could be a negative value, right?
You still get utility out of it, even if your Jaguar, depreciates 78% in the first year, right?
Yeah, but it's still not a negative value. Well, I guess it is. But man, that's a lot of negative value in 1 year, man.
Imagine you bought that car, it depreciated, it also never started. Like the car never actually, like you never even got a mile of usage out of it. That's the level we're talking about here.
Well, I guess maybe that's the problem we have with most cybersecurity companies these days.
But the problem is the industry is so trained in justification of why that's not negative value, trained on the buzzwords, trained on the corporate speak, trained on the, sort of like I was asking Kelly in the last interview, trained on creating the smoke and mirrors so that there's always a reason. Oh, it's not the tool, it's not the process, it's something we can't control.
Is to blame. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's the chaos theory. And we are very, very trained on the justification piece in this industry. And it's also not simple, right? It's not a binary. It's not like buy a tool, fix a problem. And it's also not take out a tool, don't fix a problem. Like what, you can't make those, it's just like with your physical health, right? There are often numerous things that go into it. So in that way, it's similar. But I think in terms of, hey, this has negative value, it depends how you spin it, right? And a lot of people can spin a lot of things pretty well, especially when they're keeping the whole idea of cybersecurity a little bit shrouded in this quote unquote mystery of, black box theory.
Yeah, and it's I mean that's exactly what we were talking to Kelly about is where's the rubber meets the road here is you've got to have some way you got to have success criteria, right? And even a lot of cybersecurity vendors are concerned with this, right? Like they don't want churn. They want to make sure you're buying it for the right reasons. It's something you can actually get good use out of, because word of mouth goes both ways, right? And that's what really hurt FireEye is, they about 4 years in, they started seeing a whole lot of churn. A lot of people were talking about the fact that they wasted money. They felt like they had wasted their money on it, and it was tough to recover from. So, yeah, you got to have. I feel like most POCs, like it's very difficult for most organizations to prove the value of a product. They've got no time to build the POV POC process. They don't have an environment to put it in. And it's really not going to be until after they buy it and really start using it in production, that they're going to realize, okay, yeah, this is something producing value for us or not.
So to go back to the car analogy, you have to buy that car sight unseen without taking it for a test drive, get it home and hope it starts.
Yeah.
Well, on the bright side, they picked it up for $600 million. Palo picked up Talon for $600 million. That's what started this little rant about value in markets and value in products. But they also picked up, and I don't know if we have it on here. I think we covered it last week, if I recall correctly. Was Dig, I think, for $400. So they spent about $1 billion in the last couple weeks, really.
And I imagine that was probably by design, right? Like this stuff goes on. They probably decided, hey, we need to spend about $1 billion on some acquisitions. Let's go shopping, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting the way the corporate development world works. There's certainly initiatives to go buy a thing that fulfills a need for the company or may fulfill a business gap. For example, like if they don't have any offering around data security, like Dig could have been something that filled a gap. But then there's also very opportunistic approaches to corporate development where, hey, this company's great, it's healthy, it's not healthy, it's doing well, but it's burning. They never figured out their go-to-market engine. We have a great go-to-market engine. Our sellers could sell this, off the truck all day long. We just need the tech, jumpstart us by a couple of years of building it, and then we can pick it up as a distressed or low-cost asset. So there's both flavors of corporate development that get put in here. I don't think either one of these at the multiples that they were done were distressed by any means. That's not what I'm suggesting. I think quite the opposite. I think they were both shopped for. Palo knew what it wanted to add to its roster of products. It knew the people involved. It's probably been courting them for a while, because that's another thing that it goes down to is they do partnerships and integrations for over a year and a half, and then, okay, now it's time. It's time to bring you firmly and finally into the family. And so, yeah, that's likely what happened on both of these.
Yeah. We got a comment in the Discord, yachts are the right analogy for negative value.
Yes, they are. Yachts and airplanes.
Yachts and airplanes.
Don't spend your money on either one.
Yeah. So, for context, $1 billion in the last month. And I looked at their market cap earlier this week, and I think it's around 73 billion for just for context of those purchases.
Yeah. Palo's doing some amazing stuff right now. And it's, I don't know if we have it in our article list. I posted it in the CyberY yesterday. They're making some pretty big moves around XSIAM, SIS to replace SIEM. I don't even know what XSIAM stands for, but apparently it's a new age version of SIM. But they're making a big play here. Palo is making a moonshot play really at being the largest cyber data collection engine across the board. They want to be able to collect data around every single aspect of your environment with regards to cybersecurity, whether it be events, whether it be asset data, whether it be data security, as with this acquisition, actions happening within the browser, actions happening within the endpoint, actions happening within the network. They're going to eventually farm all that into a central repository, layer AI and ML onto it. That's the new war. That's where the new cyber unified battleground is going to fight right there. Palo's going to play. Cisco wants to play based on their latest acquisition of Splunk. They want to try to play there. Question is, who's going to win? Who's going to be able to? I like what Palo's doing today, and I think these two acquisitions play a piece of that bigger story.
There's a lot of value in having a single integrated platform for this stuff, and not it reduces the overhead of having to buy separate products and integrate separate products. But yeah, so XSIAM is Extended Security Intelligence and Automation Management, which sounds to me like you're taking XDR, SIM, and SOAR and smooshing it all together.
I think it's a bigger play than that, Adrian. It's bigger play than that. I think it extends to any behavior, any event, any asset over time. It may not be day one, right? But this play to me is the forged in Mordor ring. That's what they're shooting for. I don't know if they'll ever get there, right? But that's the nirvana that they're spinning for.
But the problem is still the same as your standalone XDR and SIM. Are you going to see the right things at the right time, in enough time, and have the capability to respond to it and do something about it? And that's always been that's been the promise from the very first SIM ever, and it's we've been chasing it ever since. It's really hard to do.
Well, let me ask you a question about that. Why can't we do it? What is the big holdup that stops us from doing it?
My opinion. So I think of it in terms of red flags and yellow flags, and I think people in engineering want all the flags all the time, and you don't get to do that and see things that matter. If you have this hoarding mindset where, like, I want to collect everything, then you're making it harder to detect the things that matter.
Why?
So
because of a lack of ability to grok that much data in a human capacity.
Well, yes. When I first set up our SIM in 2004, I immediately shoved logs from over 1,700 devices into it. We're collecting over 100 million logs a day. There's just no way I was going to detect anything meaningful. And if I even wanted to see spikes in logs, I had to create all the reporting and the graphs for that manually. And if there was a big spike in firewall logs, we'd go and investigate that. It would take us a couple hours. But every single day, out of those 1,700 devices, about 50 of them would stop sending us logs. And we'd have to go investigate as to why we were no longer getting those logs. So just the management of that beast of a system, and keeping it fed and keeping those logs. So we talked to the Linux guys, and they blew away the syslog.conf on accident. So they had to add it back. Just huge amount of overhead just to feed one of these data lakes and keep it running. And then, red flags are things that are always bad. You always want to know if somebody's created a new super admin account in Google Workspace, if your whole company's based on Google Workspace, versus a yellow flag is, well, if this happens and it's this time of day and it's not normal for that to happen in this time of day, you have all these things that have to combine for it to be something concerning. That's where you get lost. And that's where I think by not separating the red flags, ensuring the red flags show up first, instead of chasing all these yellow flags, all the impossible travel, right? Like I can impossible travel all day if I have a VPN, right? And I can trigger all these impossible travel alerts, and they're all going to be false positives. And yet that's everybody's first example when they, in a lot of these systems, are these examples that are almost always false positives.
So let me play the counterpoint on that, though. And this is where I'm going to show my my futuristic tendencies, my state, the fact that I live 5 to 7 years in the future. What if all of that was automated, machine learning, AI enabled? The ability to grok that much data becomes possible in the sense of infinite speed and infinite resources, right? And if we can throw infinite compute at that problem, we could potentially, in theory, solve that problem of finding the yellows, finding the reds, triaging them. And let's really take it a step further and say, now we connect it to automations on the back end that we don't trust day one to fix the problem, but maybe we do day 2 or day 5 or day 500, right, at some point. And so if we're thinking futures, isn't the problem really 3 phases? Collecting the massive amount of data. Whoever gets the most data has the oil in cyber. Whoever can do analysis of that using automated systems without requiring human capacity in the deepest and most effective and lowest false positive way, and then automating and triggering over APIs the backends that are going to occur for remediation. Can we get to a one ring to rule them? That's the fundamental bet that I think Palo's making in a 10-year run, in a 7 to 10 year run.
I don't think it's ever going to be the tools that are really going to hold us back, that are going to be the bottleneck. I think if you created a perfect tool that only showed you red flags, I think somebody would uncheck that box and say, no, actually show me all the yellow flags also. I think they would self-sabotage in that case.
So I don't think human resources go to zero in cyber. What I'm saying is that the tooling is going to roll up. It has to roll up into a single system.
But so much of it's a mindset. Like nobody's going to automatically remediate stuff. Like I don't see a time anywhere because you're going to break people, because you're going to disconnect the CEO in the middle of an important discussion
today.
Right, it'll be in the middle of a presentation.
Well, today, yes. Tomorrow, no. I mean, there was a day when nobody would run a DAS scanner on your website because you dropped it. It would drop websites left and right. But now everybody fires DAS scanners at their website like it's nothing. I think at some point, automation, at least for a percentage, 10, 20, 50, maybe 70, we can debate the percentage, but at some point that becomes a reality.
Yeah.
And it also depends what you consider auto remediation, right? Like there are different levels of remediation that people will tolerate. And, right now, humans don't trust the machines. Yes, I think it will come over time. It's going to be a long time, but there are definite levels of what we're going to see in the next 5-10 years versus maybe 25 years ago from now. But, auto ticketing is a form of, quote, remediation, right? Depends on your definition. It depends on your nomenclature. So what is auto remediation? And I agree with Adrian that, people are going to remain pretty skeptical because all it's going to do is take one incident at a company where somebody gets reamed out by the CEO for the entire security department to go.
Yeah, when we first tried out MDM software on mobile phones, we wiped 2 people's phones on accident, and they were not syncing or backing up the last couple years worth of family photos from their phones. And once word of that got out, nobody was willing to have MDM software installed on their mobile phones after that.
Yeah, but fast forward X months, Adrian. Fast forward X months, everybody used MDM in that era. They don't anymore, but they did in that era.
Yeah. But and there's all these corner cases too, right? Like, if most of what you're concerned about, or a lot of what you're concerned about is in SaaS and you don't have logs for that, how does that get into this AI system? Or they're not, the logs you need are not coming from because more and more we're handing off the shared responsibility model. And, if Microsoft, so even in Microsoft's own case, they couldn't figure out when China had originally got into their systems during that breach because the retention of their own logs wasn't long enough. They only had 2 weeks worth of logs. And by the time they found out about the incident, it was a month in. So there's all these little corner cases that are always going to sneak up and bite you, I think.
You guys need to put on your dreamer hats, your cloud hats. Live in the future with me. Come on, the weather's warm up here.
Oh, I've been there though, and reality always crashes in.
I know, I keep getting bit too, but I can't seem to get away from it. I keep going back.
And it's exactly like we were talking about with Kelly, right? Like, people want to keep their jobs, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I need to make money to have shelter and food and take care of my family and et cetera, et cetera. So nobody wants to be like, I'm going to put my whole life on the line and maybe get fired for doing something that's kind of risky at this stage. There are very few people who are going to do that.
And I think the emphasis needs to move. Like there's so much emphasis on the SOC and on detecting something quick enough to do something about it. And I think we continue to invest in that, but more so, like in the Okta case, they should have known, or they must have known that customers were putting credentials into these HAR files and then uploading them to their support site, because they had a note on there that said, "Don't do that." But they know human nature. They know, of course, scrubbing these credentials takes extra time. A lot of people aren't going to know how to do that or what that means. They're just trying to get something fixed, so they're going to upload that file anyway. And that wouldn't have been such a big incident for Okta if they had planned for that and done something on their side to scrub credentials out of these support files that freaking Cloudflare and 1Password were handing to them. That should not have been a surprise that there were credentials in these files and these files were sitting on this system. So prevention, limiting how bad the bad thing can be, I think has to be a bigger factor here. And we saw these vendors who got hit by that Okta breach benefit from that. They're like, the attacker got into our systems, but they couldn't go much further than that because we're doing zero trust this and isolated that. And what they had access to was very limited, and they never got to any production systems or customer stuff. So we're seeing the and then on the other side, the Okta breach, 1Password told them, hey, something funny's going on here. Okta was like, nah, it's not us. It must be you guys. And they tear apart this laptop looking for malware. And can you imagine the engineer who uploaded that HAR file? Like his whole life probably got torn apart in those 2 weeks that 1Password thought it must be them. And then Beyond Trust said, no, it's not us, it's you guys. And still took another 2 weeks for Okta to believe what they were being told. And we saw this in the case with Target too, where, Symantec, FireEye, both caught the Target attack. Somebody called up Target on the phone and said, hey, you got a problem. And they still didn't believe what they were seeing and what they were hearing. So there's still very much, I think, a people process part of this that's going to have to mature along with the products. So even if you have that magic product, the people, the training, the processes have to get there also for it to be able to help you.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I don't think I meant to suggest that the product solves cyber. What I guess I meant to suggest is it solves the tool issue of cyber if done right, by unifying a whole lot of technologies into a single platform that can detect a whole lot of problems across what used to be a whole lot of siloed tool situations. 100% am not suggesting that
reducing overhead would be a huge help. Yeah. Reducing overhead, detection engineering overhead, integration overhead, building connectors and integrations overhead. Like there's a ton of overhead there that I think AI and other efforts here can really reduce.
Well, we went a long way on that first storyline.
That was a good rabbit hole to go down, though. I like that. That was a good discussion. Yeah.
Where do we go from here, boss?
So acquisitions. We're still in acquisitions. Travelers Insurance acquired Corvus Insurance. So we're starting to see the insuretechs, the MGAs, get bought up by larger insurance companies, which is interesting. We've kind of followed the path of cybersecurity specific insuretechs emerging and growing. And speaking of which, Cowbell got a $25 million round of funding, another insuretech.
I have to say it, Adrian. We need more Cowbell.
Yep. We need more Cowbell. Well, somebody agreed with you because they gave him $25 million for more Cowbell. That's a lot. That buys you a lot of Cowbell.
That's a lot of Will. What's his name? Banging the cowbell while dancing around.
Will Ferrell.
That's what that's a lot of.
Blue Oyster Cult.
That's right. So my thoughts on this one's interesting too, Adrian. I'll just kind of chuck this grenade out there too. At what point do the private equity companies get involved, if they're not already, and start rolling up these things? The interesting thing about insurance is that it's a natural reoccurring revenue stream, right? You sell the insurance once, and in general, if you're doing it right and you're servicing your client well, and nothing happens, they keep coming back. They just keep re-upping their insurance. They keep going. That's the interesting thing about insurance is sell once, cash in many times year over year for a long period of time. That is a private equity dream. That's exactly the kind of companies that private equity absolutely loves. They buy them once, they buy them small, they roll them up. But I wonder if we're going to see in the next year or two a bit of a roll-up. If we haven't already, because I haven't read these stories, maybe there is a private equity storyline to what's happening here. But I believe that at some point, private equity is going to get involved and start rolling these up into a mega insurance firm.
Would that go against the monopoly issue, though?
Yeah, it's only a monopoly issue when you get called out, right? Like there's so many monopolies going on in the U.S. right now that just haven't been called out that they don't worry about that until they have to, right? They'll start the roll-up process, get a bunch of them, and then worry about the roll-up. They're the monopoly.
Yeah, it's a tomorrow problem.
It is a tomorrow problem, absolutely. And by that point, they've already cashed in so much money, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, if this trend continues, it sounds more like, just kind of a pivot or an addition to an insurance product line, right? Like Travelers is a large general insurer, just picking up a cybersecurity product here is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, what I'd like to see, though, is like a Vista, a Thoma Bravo, or some of these guys to buy 3, 4, 5 of the small to mid-sized insurers, roll them up into a mega insurer, and run against Travelers. Be the alternate, be the big player in the space.
Yeah, it's kind of a trend we're seeing, right? Like we're seeing managed services managed by investors like traditional software companies. So now insurance, so kind of innovation in terms of what you can get those kind of multiples out of, that's not a traditional tech company or software company.
That's
right. PagerDuty acquires Gelio, and I think this was kind of a like adjacent thing for them. PagerDuty isn't strictly a security company, and Gelio was kind of automating a security use case on top of PagerDuty. So kind of just one of these things that totally made sense. I think it's one of those things where like 90% of Jelly's customers have it integrated with PagerDuty. So why wouldn't they acquire them, right?
I mean, come on. It sounds about as good as peanut butter and Gelio.
And
Katie's
moving
shaking
on.
her head for those that aren't watching live. She's just giving me the SMH right now.
Yeah. So the funding that's number one on the list, I don't know a lot about, except this company was bootstrapped, and then they just got a $65 million growth in equity investment. I don't know much about Fusion Auth, but it's certainly. I mean, we've seen it before. Bishop Fox raising funding from ForgePoint to build a product. A traditional services company deciding to build their. Trying to remember the name of the product now. But gotta look it up. Cosmos. Yeah, it used to be called Cast. So yeah, interesting. Though this isn't a services company, this does look like a product company.
Yeah, so FusionAuth is it's a number of things together, right? They pull together authentication, registration, login, user management features for folks building applications, and they
so
offer
like an
in a single
competitor.
package. Could be, but they have a free community. I mean, really what got them this funding was they have a massive free community edition that has over 13 million downloads, which means it's being used heavily around the world. They have 100% year-over-year growth, and most importantly, they're profitable. They make money. God forbid a company make money, right? So they're making money on their product, which when it comes to investment, again, if you make money and you're profitable and you're showing 100% year-over-year growth, on a reasonable base number, you can get funded today, right? That we're just looking for actual good metrics.
Yep. And should not be a shock. They're hiring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good news to hear. Definitely in this market.
It's going to be interesting to see how this impacts their growth expectations and their profitability. You know, the minute you take in $65 million, do you get on that treadmill and start to burn harder to try to grow faster, thus compromising for a while your choice to be profitable with the expectation that we're going to catch it back later? I would love to follow that as a case study. I think it would be kind of neat to see now that they've gone from bootstrapped and profitable to $65 million invested venture-backed company. Do they start to be okay with the burn and churn and try to corner a market quickly approach that generally comes with VC?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, they're going to have pressures that they didn't have before.
Right.
And
yeah,
not
but
just,
listen, I don't know how many rounds they've taken. I'd have to check it out. I'm making an assumption here that could be wrong, that this is their first round based on being profitable and doing well. Maybe it's their second round, whatever it is. They still own the majority of the company. They don't have to do anything the VC tells them. It's highly recommended, but they don't have to. They can just sit back and say, hey, we're going to remain profitable and grow this thing for another 8 years and be healthy about it. It usually doesn't go down that way because everybody wants to try to run the market over and target it and take over the whole TAM, but it's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I've seen both happen, right? Like I've seen companies that aren't pressured to do that, but then companies that are, and it all goes wrong. Like they grow the wrong way. There was a hosting company that a friend of mine worked for that was just like a poster child for how not to use that investment, how not to grow, and they blew themselves up pretty quick. And it was mostly through just breaking SLAs, just downtime. Taking some big name. I think they had one customer who's like 60% of the revenue. And they killed the contract because they were down more than 3 times in one quarter or something like that. And there was an out in the contract for that. So 60% of revenue just went away, and the whole company just cratered after that. Like the momentum was unstoppable at that point. Whereas,
somebody made a boo-boo.
Like 1Password is on the other side here, right? Like they were bootstrapped. Canadian company took their first, I think their first round of investment was $100 million. And so they're another one. They're another case study you could follow. That's very similar to this one.
Yeah, there's an article out there by Bryce Roberts, who was an investor in a company that I worked with years ago. The article is called "Putting the Emphasis on the Wrong Syllable," which is it's an interesting look back. He's been an investor focused on healthy companies with his investment firm called Indie.vc, where their goal all along was to give you money and tell you to be profitable as soon as possible and to get your company and grow in a healthy way. And now all of a sudden everybody wants their narrative, and they've been running this narrative for 7 years, right? So I'll send this over to Sam and the team to pop onto our stories list. But it's a really interesting article, especially when you look back at when he wrote this in 2015. There's a really good quote in here. It says, With capital and a dangerous narrative, we're not unicorn hunting. Rather, we're becoming the subprime lenders of the internet economy, funding digital McMansions built on increasingly questionable foundations. He wrote that in 2015 about the investment world. How poignant. So I do recommend you give this a look, especially if you're a founder looking to build a healthy company done in a healthy way. Brace is a great investor, and we'll put it on I'll have it put on the stories list.
Yeah, I'll add it to the show notes if you share it on the Slack. So ChainGuard raised 61 million Series B, supply chain security company. I think has some folks who were very. I forget who the founders were, but people were very excited when they saw that. So I think there's a lot of good community capital behind some of the founders there. Dan Lorick.
ChainGuard's doing cool stuff. They chase down a lot of Bitcoin criminals. Really, really cool research. If you get to look at their research blogs and stuff, I highly recommend it.
This is different from what you're thinking of.
Oh, is it? What am I thinking of?
Yeah. This is not the Bitcoin. This is supply chain security. So this is not the.
Oh,
you're thinking of. What are you thinking of?
Is there?
I know exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's called ChainGuard. Yeah, ChainGuard.1 instead of ChainGuard.com.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, ignore me then.
Right? Yeah. Also, Graylog, which is a log management. I don't know if they're calling themselves a SIM. I'll call them a SIM too. SIM and log management.
If they do
company.
it, you can do it.
Yeah. Another freemium community edition. Network effect grown company. Very PLG run company. Raised $39 million. So pretty good raise.
Hey, Adrian. It's the first time in 3 years I've spilt my bourbon on my laptop, so I'm going to run down and get a towel. Why don't you cut to Katie? She's going to back me up. I'll be right back.
All right. I think that would be worse if it was water. I think bourbon, it'll be okay. If it were a glass of water, I think it'd be worse.
But bourbon is okay for keyboards, but not so much water?
Yeah, I think so. More so.
Okay.
I would say.
All right.
But he probably had ice in it, so it's probably a mix of both. If it's an apple, they do pretty well having stuff poured in them. I
have actually fairly recently. I dumped a giant mug of tea on my keyboard, and it was fine.
Yeah,
I don't know what to think though. I don't know if this is going to be
a lot of water.
Hey guys, I don't know if this is going to be like, hey, it's going to smell like alcohol if it breaks, and I got to return it to my company. That would be a bad mode.
Well, hopefully, didn't you just join your company? Hopefully, you're not planning an exit this soon.
I still look like an alcoholic when I have when I return a bourbon soap laptop to him because it's broken. I hope it doesn't break.
And that would be entirely inaccurate because just kidding.
Easy.
This is a public live podcast, so technically your employer could watch this. Anyway,
there's literally bourbon dripping out of the bottom of my laptop.
Yeah, not making your case any better.
All right.
Yes, moving on.
All right, let's enough about the market and stuff. Let's see. So we had Kelly on earlier, and she did mention her latest essay was just this kind of deep dive on the origin of not just the word security, but what we mean when we say security. And I haven't had a chance to get through all of it, but this is intriguing to me because I remember when Daniel Miessler shared, I think it was a tweet. I don't think it was one of his essays, but maybe it was an essay. Well, he was also talking about the origins of the word security, where if you go back to the Latin, it means without worry, which kind of gives you a different idea of what security is all about, right? Like, is it about removing all risk? Is it about protecting things? Or without worry kind of makes you think of more the psychological nature of it, like security being more about how it makes you feel, anxiety levels, how well you sleep at night, which is I think an interesting conversation to have, at least. But different way of looking at security in general.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just I browsed through this earlier, and as she said in her interview, her goal is to be thought-provoking, not necessarily to have 100% of the answers. And she does bring up a lot of questions, like not just what do we mean, but how does it change? How can you adapt it? How does it affect you? How does that change over time? So it's an evolving concept, and it's not just a word like, infosec or cybersecurity. It's an approach, it's a philosophy, it's a concept, and I really I like that. It's because we tend to look at security as something that's a concrete. We tend to look at security as something that's a people, a process, or a technology, not a concept that people, process, and technology contribute to. So I thought it was pretty interesting.
It's worthwhile, thinking about just a concept of security and what it means practically. Like I've seen in some cases people talking about removing all risk. I'm like, no, that's not the goal at all. Like, yeah, if you remove all risk and you're talking about in terms of a company and its health and its growth, or removing all risk from an investment, you're talking about eliminating growth, because there has to be some risk if you're going to make some money or if you're going to grow a company. You don't want to be the last one to move into a profitable new sector, but you don't know if that sector is going to be profitable until you're there. So risk is necessary.
And the thing is, with risk, the concept, the idea, again, it's a concept, it's an idea. It's been around for so much longer than cybersecurity or infosec or whatever we want to call it has been. And so people are much more comfortable with the concept of risk. And in a business context, in a corporate context, boards of directors, executive, business unit heads have learned over really centuries, but if we just want to go back a few decades for this, current industrial revolution or whatever it is, people are accepting of the concept. They know how to deal with the concept. Nobody, maybe in cybersecurity, but outside of cybersecurity, you don't hear people talking about eliminating risk. You hear them talking about managing risk. And because cybersecurity is so much newer, we tend to look at it as a, concrete block. It is this, instead of a concept that we can manage that changes over time.
Right. And when you manage your 401k, like you get a slider, right? Like how aggressive do you want to be? Like how much risk are you comfortable with? And that's
exactly. When you're young, the old theory goes, when you're young in a 401k, you're super aggressive, and then it slides over time as you get a little older and nearer to retirement. Same concept. But we really haven't embraced that. Obviously, that's not, the older a company is, the less risk we want to take. That's not necessarily a one-to-one parallel, but it can shift with the market. It can shift with social, political, economic, whatever outside factors. It's not this static thing that doesn't move. It's constantly changing and shifting, but it is an idea that has shades of gray.
Yeah. Like to use an example, I had a friend who was giving a talk at B-Sides Las Vegas, and he had spent 6 months putting together some kind of email security tool. I forget exactly what it was. So he was both going to give a talk about it, and he was going to release this tool for the first time. And he had to cancel his talk because he had encrypted everything. His slides, all the work he did on the tool, the actual source code for the tool, everything was encrypted in a container, and he couldn't decrypt it. Yeah, like the password or what he thought was the password wasn't working, or the key was corrupted or something. I forget exactly why he couldn't decrypt it. And I remember thinking about that, thinking like that, the risk of, like, the worst case scenario here is something he was going to make completely open source and public gets released early. And to me, that's not worth the risk of losing, that data forever, losing 6 months of work and, the ability to do this, this talk that might help your career.
Well, part of it is a personality thing too. Certain people are more risk averse than others.
Very much.
But
very much so.
I love how Kelly, and she relies on a lot of other sources too to prove her point, which is also a great, I think, way of thinking about things. The idea of cybersecurity, it doesn't have to be one thing. It can be an idea. And it's like, you and I, we go back talking about zero trust back in 2018, and everybody was going, oh, there are zero trust products. And same thing, we can relate this to so many other things, like not a product, concept, framework, idea, approach. Why shouldn't cybersecurity as a whole be a concept, a framework, an approach?
Yep. Yeah, so good essay to dive into. Definitely a long read, so but a fun read. And
you never feel like when you're reading her stuff, though, like, oh my God, are we really only on page 4?
Don't sleep on the footnotes. The footnotes are fun. The next one, the next essay I really liked, and Tyler, I did get putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable added, emphasis on the wrong syllable. That is now in the show notes.
Excellent.
But number 12 is really interesting. No Way Out: The Changing World of Cybersecurity Exits. So I don't know the person that did this, but very much feels like some of Ross Hollyluke's stuff. Some of the other stuff we like out there, some of Mike Prevett's stuff. But he does some analysis of all the cybersecurity unicorns or supposed unicorns out there, right? Like a lot of this data is pre-market drop. So the valuations have not been adjusted yet because those companies have not received new valuations. But basically, he's talking about like what are the possible exits for these companies? What's going to happen here? And he's got some really good analysis here.
There was also a footnote, but I thought this was really interesting. And again, thought-provoking versus here's what it is. It was an idea about that we're in uncharted territory here because we haven't been through this exact scenario in current day. But it was a really interesting take, and I don't know, I think he's on to something here. We're going to have a lot of CEOs and VCs and founders who are really surprised that there's quite literally nowhere to go for them.
Well, I think we're already there, right? Like we're already, I don't know how far into this, a quarter of the way into this, half of the way into this, but yeah, we've already seen some exits that must have been disappointing to investors and founders. Some exits that like we're talking about today, where it's actually pretty lucky to get such a decent exit in this market. But yeah, I don't think I think we still have a lot of startups that are just not going to be around a year from now, and I don't think we've seen most of those yet. And I'm really interested. So he's got this middle tier here, where it's he says there have been 10 total cybersecurity acquisitions above $5 billion by strategic buyers. 10 ever. And you go down to the level below that, and it's like 118 companies expecting $1 billion exits. That there's just no way that's going to happen. So
yeah,
what's going to happen to these companies? I did say we were going to stop talking about the market. I lied. I put this in the wrong place.
I don't think there's any chance of that ever really happening on this show.
Yeah. Well, I thought we were done with all the market stories. I'd forgotten this one was kind of in the middle as an essay.
There are horses. We will beat them. Or there are unicorns, we will beat them. They are horses with horns.
So so if you subscribe to the RSS feed of databreaches.net, you'll understand that what I've included here, story number 13, Southwestern Ontario hospitals will rebuild network from scratch amid fallout from cyber attack. More data leaked.
That sounds really fun.
Like this is such a common and normal thing these days that you really have to follow the RSS feed to appreciate how disturbingly normal this is. But the reason I included it is because it's not always from scratch. But the idea of, ransomware operators said, okay, we're not going to go after hospitals or healthcare and stuff like that. Not only was that a lie, like, can you imagine the disruption from having to rebuild not just one, but several hospitals from scratch? I can't imagine.
Then again, given the state of hospital security, maybe that's a good thing.
You think it's going to get rebuilt well in the amount of time that they're going to give themselves to do?
I didn't say that. You didn't hear that come out of my face.
I don't know that it's going to be a good thing. I don't know that they're going to be.
I was just positing that maybe there is an opportunity of which these people
they're
could take
businesses,
advantage.
right? Like, if they want people to go back to those hospitals, they've got to do at least somewhat assure people that,
Really?
okay, we've done a better job this time, right?
You think the average consumer cares?
When they're being operated on? I would think so.
Well, yeah, if you don't have my right vitals, I'm dead anyway. But no, do you think the average consumer either knows or cares? I don't.
I don't know. This is mainstream. Most of these news, when you look at
I've been in and out of hospitals and doctors' offices for various non-life-threatening reasons lately, and the amount
these are
data
huge stories
just
in their communities. These are huge stories.
So they don't even care. They just don't even care. They're saying it out loud. They're certainly not going to care about their EHRs.
Yeah, I don't know. Almost all this reporting, like it doesn't even get to the national level. It's so normal. But anybody who still watches their local news would probably know about this.
Well, they would know, but I don't think they care. I don't think the average consumer thinks about their health information as something that anybody would want access to.
We'll find out if we start hearing about more hospitals going under. We'll find out. I guess.
Didn't we have one last week, go completely under and die? Wasn't it?
Yeah, we did. I
don't remember which one it was, but I remember reading a story of they were just like, you know what? Forget it. We're done. We quit. We throw in the towel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I'll pull it up. I actually just added a new company to the destroyed by breach list. It was a Danish hosting company that all their customers' websites, all their servers all got encrypted, and they didn't pay the ransom, and they were able to recover zero customer data. And so they just I actually, the CEO of the company, I just pinged him on LinkedIn earlier asking to interview him because I saw he actually gave a talk about his experiences. He says he wants to share his experiences so other people can learn from it. So maybe we could bring him on the show. But yeah, looks like that hosting company went under. That was Cloud Nordic was the name of it.
That takes I got to admit, that takes a little bit of chutzpah to say, hey, I know you're out of business and you're the former CEO, but are you interested in coming on our show?
Yeah. Yeah, it was Illinois Hospital, Spring Valley, Illinois, St. Margaret's Health was the hospital that went under. So still, just to make it clear, these are pretty rare events. They only happen a couple times a year, across, it's far less. It's a fraction of 1% of companies that are not able to recover from breaches. But when I see hospitals having to rebuild their networks from scratch, I can't imagine of the disruption that, especially if it's a whole group of hospitals, right? Like that's putting pressure on other area hospitals if they can't take patients in.
Yes. And our health system is so broken that we're not going to
fix it. This is Canada, but I won't speak about Canada's health system.
I'm not going to speak about Canada either, although I will privately. But in the U.S., it's so bad, and this has nothing to do with cybersecurity. But the longer we allow insurance companies to run our healthcare system, we're not going to get better healthcare. And if we don't get better healthcare, and if we don't manage it better, manage the people, the process, and the technology, we're going to continue to have these problems because cybersecurity, let's get back there, cybersecurity doesn't have a chance in our current system because it's not part of the equation. It's just not. It's all about profits. And what is security? It's a cost center.
Yeah, and we know hospitals have a certain amount of pressure on them. How long it takes for an emergency room to get to to pull someone in. I don't know the right hospital lingo for all of it. I know there is a term for this metric for the amount of time it takes to get seen if you're in critical condition, and you suddenly remove 3 hospitals from a geographical area. That's got to go up in other areas. This has to have an impact on unnecessary deaths.
Yes, people will die. People will absolutely die. If the hospital system goes down, people will die. We haven't seen it at huge levels yet, but this is a fact. And we've got so many other pressures in hospital systems. The friction between the need for quick access, the pressure between IoT or IoT devices not being down, being functional, focusing on patient care, and quote security. I mean, there are so many points of friction in healthcare that the way our healthcare system is run today, it is not set up to allow for improved processes. Not right now. It's just not. On top of that, because security is a cost center and healthcare in this country is all about profits right now, we're not going to start paying people in healthcare security the same rates as we are for people who go into, let's say, vendor organizations. It's just not that attractive. Yeah. It's like the people who go into security in academia. Thank God for those people, right? Like, they're just not making the same money. They have a mission, they have a purpose. But there are a lot of people who say, I have to sit behind the desk all day. Am I going to make, let's do this very simply, am I going to make $25,000 or $250,000? I know that balances off, but you see what I'm saying? Like, it's so skewed towards not paying people in these critical institutions like academia, like healthcare, and skewed towards making shiny blinky.
Yep. Yeah, I don't see that. And then there's the critical infrastructure that a lot of which doesn't even have security people, barely have IT people. So yeah, there's definitely some problems there. Let's see, a few more things I want to talk about before we wrap here. So Stephen Schmidt, who was the CISO of AWS before he moved up to Amazon's CISO, moved up a tier when his boss, Andy Jaffe, moved up to CEO of Amazon, has 6 questions every board should ask its CISO, which is pretty interesting. And if I don't have a subscription to this particular media, so I ran it through 12foot.io, 12ft.io, which allows you to read it. And the 6 things who owns security, what kind of visibility do we have over all of our property, who has access to what data, why do they need it and for how long, how do we rank our assets such as client data or trade secrets by importance, how many layers of protection do we have, and then how will we respond to an attack. So all pretty good in very high level, like organizational level, planning level stuff that you think would be obvious, but a lot of companies still don't do. You still see companies, big companies, no idea if they're going to pay the ransom or not. No idea how to answer that question. They've seen 1,000 other companies, peers, get hit by ransoms, haven't worked that out beforehand. How you doing, Tyler?
Oh, I'm still fighting with my bourbon-soaked laptop, so we'll figure it out, but still working on it.
So a very good report here, a multi-source analysis. So this is like a meta-analysis of different attacks, analysis of attacks. So Cyentia Institute, Jay Jacobs and Wade Baker's company took a whole bunch of industry write-ups of how attacks occur, like just breaking down the different techniques and adversaries and stuff like that, and found some super interesting stuff here. So the TLDR of this is there is a tiny fraction of the MITRE ATT&CK framework that ever gets used in real life. Yeah, a huge swath of this stuff just never comes up, apparently. So, 85% of attack sub-techniques were never reported by any source. Only 1% of attack sub-techniques were reported by at least 5 sources. A third of attack techniques.
That seems like something I would expect, right? Is that, hey, as an attack, flip it and say, as an attacker, what am I going to focus on? What am I going to do? I'm going to focus on what works. And if I have repeated success with technique A or technique B, I'm going to stay there. I'm not going to leave those until I've exhausted the cash to be made or the fame to be had or whatever it is that I'm doing it for, right? Whatever my incentive structure is, I'm going to leverage and hit those things that are going to work. And then once those stop working, whether it's a person fix or a people fix, a tech fix, a process fix, whatever it is that companies start to put in place, then maybe I'll go to somewhere else. Until then, I'm going to stay on the things that work.
Well, in this, if you understand how attack is designed, this shouldn't be a surprise, right? Attack is meant to be, the MITRE ATT&CK framework is meant to be comprehensive. Like, this is everything anyone could possibly do, right? And a lot of vendors will warn you against trying to have an answer for every single thing on the attack framework. Like, it's just not going to be worth it to protect against a lot of this stuff. So we were actually talking to Fortinet's research firm. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy, but they were working on a heat map of the attack framework to show you like what attacks happen and which don't. And that's what this is. This literally, the report contains heat maps of like which items on the attack framework you should worry about and which ones you shouldn't.
Well, I'm thinking all of that should go into our threat management and threat landscape and threat exposure mapping you do at the beginning of your process when you're building your program, right? That's the type of stuff that you should look at. What are the chances of this actually happening to me? What is going to happen if it does, right? That's the information we need to make smart decisions.
And none of it's surprising. Like, if you're familiar with attacks, you're going to read this report and you're going to, okay, yeah, I should be worried about PowerShell scripts. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the heads up on that. But it is useful to see the research actually done. Like, and if it confirms what you already know, great, you're doing a good job. But also now you can argue, maybe we shouldn't dump a ton of cash into solving that because it's going to be a non-problem. It's not something that's likely to be used by attackers. So maybe helps you be a little bit more strategic with your security program and what you spend money on. All right, I think with that, think we'll hit the squirrel story and go out. There's a few other interesting stories here. If you want to check them out, you can go to securityweekly.com/ESW339. And our last one is humor coming from Phil Venables, of all people. So Phil Venables, very well-known security guy, name in the security field, and usually doing some kind of thought leadership piece that's very interesting. But this one is caricatures of security people. And the way I read this is he's making fun of the stereotypes of security people. He's not making fun of these groups of security people directly, which I think some people kind of, at least from how I'm reading it, I think they took it the wrong way. And we're.
I didn't take it the wrong way. I read through this, and my biggest problem with this piece is I think he goes over 15, if I recall correctly, 16 different characters, 16 different stereotypes, and I'm 7 of them, Adrian. I'm 7 of them. That's so sad.
So you didn't like it because it was a mirror?
Yes, I didn't like it because it was right.
I think we need to. I think you need an award. I think that gets you an award. Got to create an award for you, because that's almost half of them. Tyler, you've hit almost half.
I know. It's pretty sad, actually. Yeah, everything from industry analyst to vendor security product manager. I've done a bunch of it.
Cyber savvy board member.
Yeah, I've done it all. And yes, they're right on he's right on every single one of the stereotypes that he's making fun of. Yeah. He pretty much touched a nerve.
My favorites are the CISOs who come from different backgrounds, or in different roles, like the field CISOs, like Dunn being like a CISO, and would rather give advice than worry about going to jail. The CISO turned chief risk officer, the CISO with a military background. Yeah, these are pretty good.
And the illustrations were pretty cool too. Like it's not.
Did you read? Did you read how he created the illustrations?
AI.
They are generated by AI from the text of the item. And I think it did a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Like number 2, what do you think cryptographer turned security guru? Like, what do you picture in your mind? Do you picture glasses and a huge beard?
100%, for sure.
They are stereotypes. Self-appointed thought leader. I'm glad he made that number 1. And each one has a quote. It's incredible that all CISOs don't report directly to the CEO or the board. That's the only way security can ever be effective. I've heard it.
Yes.
Wait, is that one of your 7?
Which one?
Number 1. Self-appointed thought leader.
Of course. Yes, absolutely. I'm self-appointed for sure. And it touches every nerve. I didn't like that one at all. And actually, because it was the first one, I read it and was like, oh my God, this whole article is going to be about me. This is really sad. Industry
analyst. Yeah. We got hit with a bunch of these real quick. Vendor security product manager. Oof. Yep. I feel attacked.
Do you feel attacked or seen?
Yes. Not as much as Tyler does, but I am also in this article, and I don't like it. All right. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks so much, Katie and Tyler, for joining me today. Thanks, Tyler, for hanging out through hard times, booze times.
I think the pain is limited to one lost USB port. I'll survive.
This episode is brought to you by Keyboard Resilience.
Yeah,
100%.
All right, and a big thanks to everybody watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We've got one more show coming to you next week before Thanksgiving, and then we'll take a week off. And we'll see you then.